Hello, my human family. Today I have the person who has the audacity to also have the name Kristi. I will say I actually one of the first people I came out to, and I asked her if it was okay to use the name Kristi, although I spelled it differently. And somebody I've been following since she sat on a couch and put on her phone to record. One of the most infamous and famous people on YouTube.
In certain circles.
Depending on where you're coming from, it is Dr. Kristi Winters.
Hello, how are you doing? And yeah, it was a wonderful thing. It was such a touching moment, and I was so happy. And to share a name with you is wonderful.
Oh, thank you. I spelled it like Preciosity did,
Mm-hmm.
which weirdly enough, she didn't know until a few weeks ago.
Oh, oh, I bet she was very flattered.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I haven't asked her.
Oh well, she's a wonderful person, so I know her heart, and I know she would be.
Yeah, probably. Um, the it was weird because I was so careful about everything, and I was so worried about everything when I first came out. I do a thank you fairly early in most videos, and in this case, you're one of the few people I'm going to do a thank you immediately here. When I came out, my finances collapsed, and I wasn't able. I was one of your patrons, but you insisted that I come to the patron hangout anyway, even though I had to pull my patron, because you said I should be on camera and should be visible. And that meant you did that and Shives did that. And it meant the world to me. I didn't want to be on camera again. I thought nobody would ever want to talk to me. All the things you think when you come out. And it meant the world to me. And I think I wouldn't be doing this now if not for that.
Well, I think you would if I wasn't in your life. I think you have a North Star pulling you. But I was right then. And I'm happy to say that that I was right. And yeah, it's true. And you're a wonderful person. And so, of course, like the YouTube, especially in the politics area, is filled with so many not very nice people. So, yeah, good people, their voices should be heard. And I'm glad you are, putting yours out there.
Thank you. Well, when someone says I'm a wonderful person, I just sort of curl up into a ball and I don't know what to say.
Oh, then you just do the British thing where you feel very embarrassed, but then you do the American thing where you go, thank you. And if it's not, it's to acknowledge just to make me feel better, even if you feel uncomfortable. How about that? That's all.
I, I absolutely acknowledge you. I appreciate you saying it. Thank you, and I feel the same about you.
Oh,
As I was mentioning before, like I said, I was a really early subscriber, so it's been well worth it.
oh, likewise. Mutual. I feel like we should hug.
Well, virtual hug.
Virtual hug. Oh, curling up on the microphone. Okay.
Oh. Well, the questions, you know what they are. What is it you do, and why do you do it? I mean, you're a small town girl. Well,
Living
from
in a lonely world.
Wisconsin. Yeah, I know. My brain went there immediately too. From Wisconsin, and now you're in Germany, and you're going to England at the
Yeah,
tomorrow.
Thursday night. Yeah.
We're recording this on. It's
Monday.
Monday. Monday,
Yes.
yes.
I need all the time between now and Thursday I can get.
Yes. Well, what is it you do? It's because I find what you do fascinating, and I still don't quite understand it.
Well, what I do is sort of a conglomeration of things. So so where I work is actually a Leibniz Institute for the social sciences, and that means it's not quite a university, but it's connected to university, and it's a research institute. But we don't really teach, although we do have PhD students who are linked to the University of Cologne. And initially, I was brought in because they were developing a data harmonization software, which deals with what we call in the social sciences construct validity. It's basically, are we measuring what we think we're measuring? And how do we know we're measuring what we think we're measuring? And when you harmonize variables from different countries or different time periods with different question wordings, you have to be very clear as to how, like, if you have a 5-point scale in one year and a 7-point scale in another year, how you're making that 7-point scale a 5-point scale in order to be comparable, and what
Right.
happens to the other, information that you're collapsing down. So they wanted to be able to track with a lot of precision variable harmonizations in cross-national studies and longitudinal studies and multilingual studies. And I had my PhD was on a completely different area of construct validity, but it was an issue that I was familiar with and interested in. And initially it was supposed to be only for 2 years. It was a 2-year contract, but then it got extended to a further 2 years. And I think even by the 3rd year, they'd offered me permanency, because what I do in addition to that is I do independent research. We're a research institute, so we're expected to publish. And my
Right.
main source of research, although my most recent publication was about the no religious belief respondents in America for Encyclopedia for Politics and Religion for Oxford University Press. Mostly I published on British elections. And so while I was managing that project for a while, it was also when they had elections and when they had referendums. So basically, ever since 2014, I've been in the field almost every year collecting data. And they're only supposed to have elections every 5 years in that country. So that's what I did. But then that project, the software is sort of done, and they wanted to move the software engineer off, computer scientist, to a different project. And then oddly enough, because of my YouTube skills, I was brought in to finish off a EU grant that was in its final 9 months. And the person who had been managing it before had been off sick for several months. And what I ended up doing was they had all these webinars planned, and it was just, it was like, the thing when you're a hammer, every problem looks like a nail.
Yes.
And they had this desire to document things about various tools that they were building to help social scientists. So they were online tools, fancy name, digital infrastructures, but they're online tools to help people work with big data sets or to look up information about studies in a very efficient way. That project, they were going to do webinars for everything. And that's because the people who were running it knew how to do webinars. And I was like, I can do more than webinars. So I ended up recording live workshops and embedding them inside of PowerPoint slide to make them more visually interesting, developing a branding concept for the overall and final products of the project. I had to travel to Bergen and Tilburg and somewhere else. I can't remember. I went somewhere this summer in July to do a live recording and got to meet some really interesting people working at data archives and create little informational videos. And when I got moved off of that project, when that ended in August, then there's all this sort of work that actually was promised on a different project with videos. So once again, I am making a bunch of educational videos. And in the recent weeks, I have learned about georeferenced social science data, how they create all those maps with different colors and densities and stuff, or they compare time points. I've learned about social media data and web scraping and how you use APIs on websites in order to collect data and some of the ethical issues that exist around web scraping. And also learned about, I knew about metadata. The archive data model of how to process information in order to make it accessible. So while I'm, sort of bringing my technical skills of lighting and sound and video editing and whatever, I'm also getting a crash course in data archiving and big data, the future, like where social science is really going, because it is, face-to-face surveys will always have their place, but with the information age and also with the power of statistical programs now and the kinds of data files that are being collected and can be collected, it's really changing the way people are doing social science.
Well, yeah, really.
It's so nerdy.
No, I was just going to say, so you're the one who makes the different shades of pink on a map?
No, I know, but now I know how they get them to be that way.
Oh, okay.
So I understand how they link like tabular data about the geographical area to an actual GIS locating map, and then they can link up that value with that location and use that numerical value to represent, density or migration or whatever they're looking at.
Well, that's hugely important. I mean, Britain right now being the mess that is.
That's definitely an accurate description. I'm not going to contest.
Yeah, that's got to keep you hopping over the pond, or over the river quite a bit.
Yeah, well, the channel. Technically, yeah.
God, I knew there was a word and my brain was just blanking on it.
Yeah, well, they have that, what do you call it, a portmanteau, the Chunnel, the channel tunnel. And so that's also how I remember it. Yeah, the politics there. Now, our study's been running since I founded it and ran it myself for the first time in 2010, and then I've had a co-investigator ever since, and currently it's a team of 3 of us. But we've kind of developed a series of questions that we ask at every single pre-election and every single post-election. And they're very much informed by the major study, the quantitative study, the British election study. So we ask people like, what is the most important issue or most important issues to them as they're weighing up how they're going to vote. We ask them about what, if they're leaning toward one party or another. We ask them to evaluate the leaders on their impressions of them. And so we have it's not so much like just tell me how you're going to vote. What we know from understanding people is you ask someone a direct question, they'll give you an answer, but it might not be the full picture. And so you sometimes have to ask around it. And a lot of our questions are kind of like context questions and getting people to talk about things they've seen in the media, impressions they have, also predictions of what they think might happen in the future given X or Y. And it's interesting to watch doing a series of these now. I have noticed, for instance, that what people tend to predict will happen in the pre-election focus groups is whatever happened in the last election. So if you had a decisive majority, they'll predict a majority. If there's a hung parliament, they'll predict a hung parliament. Some people do look at the polls, and occasionally we'll have a participant who came in and said, I predicted the outcome of the election. But mostly people tend to think whatever happened last time is probably what's going to happen again. And that's kind of what we start with, interestingly enough, in political science. When we want to predict change, we look at where things were sort of last time and what's changed, because in what happened, it is something that will influence it. So anyway, I don't want to get too nerdy down that road. We didn't. So
one of the things that's always annoyed me, knowing something about statistical analysis, I mean, I'm not in any ways an expert on it, but
nor am I. I'm functional in statistical analysis.
One of the things that always bugs me is when people say, no one's ever polled me, as if extrapolation is not a valid thing.
There's some things that we know about polling, and that's just from doing results. You can actually think about it in a logical term. If you had a bag of M&M candies, but there were only the red and the brown, it's just completely 50-50 split. You wouldn't actually need to pull that many samples of 10 out before you don't need you don't need to have half the bag in order to get an accurate assessment of reds and browns. And when you have a population that is very similar, you actually need fewer random samples because they are broadly the same. When you have a more, heterogeneous or variegated, a very bigger population with a lot of differences in it, then you need you need a bigger sample size if you want to talk about, let's say, the American population. If you have people who are randomly selected that are, let's say, 30% African American and 27% or 26% Hispanic. And this, if you have generally something similar, and it is purely random, that sample at that point with a margin of error, you could pull it again. And what we've learned is you'll get similar results within that margin of error. So if it's a
Yes.
4-point margin of error, it might be 40% or 48%. We call it 44% because that's right in the middle. But, you know, if you pulled another sample, it might be 42. If you pulled another sample, it might be 48. If you pulled another sample, it'd be 40, but it would always be in that range. And that's what we're sampling. We're not, you know, we get these point estimates, but really you should be looking at the range of it. And what you want, but then if you want to say, okay, well, what do white women think and what do black women think? Then you need enough of those, sort of like a sample of those group independent. So you need a minimum, usually what they say is 250 observations for a sample. And that gets into like then your sample size is getting into, you know, 1,500 people or 1,800 people. And that gets more expensive if you're doing it face to face, but online surveys are becoming increasingly inexpensive and accessible.
Well,
This
yeah.
is such a nerdy conversation.
I know, but this is the kind of nerdy I actually
Okay.
like. But
Okay.
yes, I am going to change it because I can see people going, all right, what's PewDiePie doing now?
Yeah. Yeah, but if you want to talk about sample size, I mean, for hours, we can do that, but it's just going to be for us then.
Well, let's see. Redheaded binary trans people. I'm thinking I would have to be in that sample size because I don't know how many of us there are. You know?
Well, well, I mean, I think, you know, if you look at people whose views, whose life experiences and economic situation would be close to yours. You know, I think that's
Yeah.
also, we're talking about socialization processes that help shape that. Things like getting older. We know that, you know, attitudes change as people get older. So
in 3 months, I switched demographics.
yes.
So
Yeah,
I'm
but
looking forward to that.
yeah, the really quick version was, yeah, I was of like, why do I do what I do? So I was born in Wisconsin, you know, did my high school, you know, basically K through 12. I split it up, like we moved, it's still within Wisconsin, but like 90 miles away. Then I went and got my undergraduate degree, but I was very involved in politics by then. So the first time I skipped school, I've told this story before, but the first time I skipped school, I actually called my mom and asked for permission because my friend at the, who was my high school friend, her dad was known as a socialist librarian, and she was going down to Madison, which was like an hour and a half away by car, to attend a U.S. out of Central America protest, and I wanted to go. so that was actually the first time I skipped school, and also my first political protest. It was probably like 1988 or something like that. And so I was very politically active from a pretty early age, although being, in very white bread Wisconsin, it was liberal feminism. You know, I didn't get exposed to a lot of Marx or anything like that, but it was certainly left for the Fox Valley, which voted Republican consistently, and the Republican Party at the time.
Yeah,
so,
no doubt.
Did the undergraduate thing, get involved in politics. There was an opening. I actually attended a meeting for the Clinton Gore, like students, Democrats on campus. And they said, there's a vacancy at the county board level. And it'd be great if somebody, for this seat, like for the college seat, it would be great to have a Democrat. So I applied and I got it. And so I became a county board supervisor at the age of 20. And then I ran for re-election. Yeah, I ran for re-election on the Tuesday. And then at the same time that year, I ran for student government the year before and lost by a few percentage points. And then I ran again the next year. And so on Tuesday, I was elected to the county board, and Wednesday, I was elected student government president. And so that was a busy year. And then I got a job advocating for Wisconsin students. It was called United Council of the basically University of Wisconsin Students. And we had 6 or 7 people who were paid, it was like $18,000 a year at the time. It was not very much to live in Madison. But we had an academic advisor, like someone who kept track of, that was my position, to keep track of like legislation and other things related to academic developments on campus. We had a legislative person. And it was like a little lobbying group, but just for UW students.
Wow.
And then after that, I ran for president of that and lost, but the next Monday I was offered a job on a campaign. So I picked up sticks and I moved to Racine, Wisconsin, and I worked on the recall of George Pataki, and the Democrat was Kim Plotke. Kim Plotke. And it was an upset race. He was an incumbent. He had voted to raise taxes in Racine and Kenosha area in order to fund the Milwaukee Brewers Stadium. And he promised he wouldn't do it. And then after 2 votes where it wouldn't pass, he changed his vote. And because of him, the tax went into effect. So he was recalled by his constituents, and then Kim ran against him. And we won against all odds. And then a bunch of jobs became available. So I got a job working as a legislative aide for the Senate president. And then I was offered a job running an office in the minority in the House. And then I was offered a job by the Democratic Party. And I did some advance work for Hillary Clinton and Al Gore. And then there was also, and then after that job ended, I got offered an office manager position in a state senator's office, and then eventually became his chief of staff. And after that, because a relationship in my life ended, and also my boss had become a cabinet secretary for the governor, and he brought me over to work for him. But a month after I started, he got in a fight with the governor, and the governor asked for his resignation. So I had this relationship that ended. My job, I was on the job market. And a friend said, what do you want to do and where do you want to go? Because you're freer now than you've been in a long time. And I thought to myself, well, I've always wanted to try out England, go to the UK. And I've always, I've been thinking a lot about getting my degree again. So you didn't have to take the GRE. So I avoided that test and applied to a bunch of British universities, got accepted all of them. But I know now that's because I was an international student. We pay premium tuition. So that's not a compliment, really. And I picked Essex because it had a guy doing research that was exactly what I wanted to know. He was interested in voter behavior. His name is Professor David Sanders. He was one of the principal investigators on the British election study. And I went there to study
I actually
his
know
course.
who that is.
Yeah?
Weirdly enough.
Oh, wow. That's really cool.
I read a book that he was referenced several times in a book I read, and I can't remember the name of the book right now. But
oh, okay. He was famous for a while for a book he wrote about Britain falling as an empire. I can't remember the name of it now because we never read it because it was in the 80s, or the 90s. But anyway, so I got my master's, and then there was a position going on the British election study, and David encouraged me to apply, and I did, and I got that job. I had, for a graduate student, when they're looking for a senior research officer to manage their stuff and keep track of things, being an office manager for a state senator, I brought a whole bunch of skill sets that people who are 24 couldn't bring, because British people tend to start, they start at 17 at their undergraduate. It's a 3-year program. They'll go right into their master's and right into their PhD and have a PhD by 26 and no world experience. And so, so I did. I applied for a PhD and to be a candidate. I was accepted and worked on the British election study. And after that, I learned of the British Academy postdoctoral fellowships, which are the best postdoctoral fellowships that I think exist. They are a 3-year funded postdoctoral position that also limits the amount of teaching you have to do, or can do even, to get the money. So
funded is probably the key word there.
Yeah. And I was paid like an entry-level member of staff, so it wasn't like I was getting paid, minimum wage or anything. And it was during that time that I founded the Qualitative Election Study of Britain. And when, coming up to the GACES time now, 2011, the Tories had just won. They said they were going to cap non-EU visas in the UK as a way to bring down immigration rates.
Right.
And I was 1 year out, from having to be on the British job market, being disadvantaged as not being an EU person. And when a job came across my email from a friend that I'd also gotten a PhD with in Cologne, Germany, and she's like, if you know people who would be interested, please pass this around. And I read it and I went, I could do that. And so I wrote to her and I was like, can you tell me more? And she's like, I'm so happy because I sent you that job to advertise it, but I was really hoping you'd apply. And she said, okay, so it's a 2-year position to start. You'd be overseeing this software, like I've described before. Also, you'd learn German because they want you to, try to integrate if you decided to just whatever, and we have a much
Right.
larger travel budget than they have at the universities in Britain. And if you like it, you could maybe apply to have your contract extended. And if you don't like it, you can just walk away. And I was like, where is and she said, oh, you'll make about as much as you're making now, but Cologne is so much cheaper to live in than the UK. So you're going to feel rich.
Well, that is good. So, and ever since you've been based in Cologne, right?
Yeah, 2011. It's hard to believe it's been that long. It's been very enjoyable, and I have no desire to leave. Like even right now, I've been here long enough that even though I'm not a permanent resident,
Yeah.
if I was for some reason made redundant, I would get unemployment benefits. Like I could stay here for a while I sorted my shit out,
Oh,
and either apply for another job or started a business or whatever I wanted to do. So
well,
yeah.
this seems a lot to be the power of I can do that
Yeah,
in your life.
and now
Which
that you say that, I realize, yeah. I say that too often, actually.
no, I mean that's
I
great.
take on too much work. Like I take on too much work.
The one of the I can do that gets you very far in life. I mean, I wanted to be in the arts when I was young. My mom wanted me to be a stand-up comedian, which was not going to happen. But I wanted to be either a musician or an actor or both. I wound up
Yeah.
acting briefly, but so
I
had
just
my
picture you as a musician. It's hard for maybe as a musician who tells jokes like a Billy Connolly or something.
oh yeah. Well, Billy Connolly's my hero,
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So, but one of the things they tell you in acting school is if they ask you, "Can you ride a horse?" you say yes.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Just figure it out later. Say yes now. I will by the time I get on the horse. Yes.
Yes. It's so how did the YouTube channel come about? Because that sort of came out of the blue and it took off a lot quicker than a lot of people do.
Yeah, well, one thing I sort of omitted from the previous study was that actually, like the leaving of the UK was also not driven by, but certainly facilitated by the end of another long-term relationship. Every time I have a bad breakup, I have to emigrate, which is why I don't date anymore. I like Germany. I don't want to go anywhere. Sorry, what was the question again? I know it was related, but
the YouTube channel.
Oh yeah, yes. So it was a big thing. So it was one thing to move to the UK where everyone kind of spoke the same language, and it was kind of the same culture, although you have to learn to navigate British culture as an outsider. And then the idea of kind of picking up my life again after having been 8 years in the UK and being quite happy there, to a place where I didn't speak the language. And when I moved to the UK, I was moving to a university setting, so I knew I would be making a bunch of friends because everybody there needed to make friends. Whereas when you move to just a city,
Yeah.
But my life in Cologne got sorted out. I joined a group called Thursday Night Drinks Cologne, where a bunch of international people and Germans who really like to speak English drunkenly and at loud volumes in bars would get together and do that. So I'd kind of gotten to a pretty good place, and I felt, I guess it was a way to be sort of extroverted. And also I miss teaching. I actually really enjoyed teaching. I was told by a lot of my students, actually, like on the student evaluations, several of them said they left my lectures, mind you, on research methods, uplifted.
Well, good. I mean,
but my students,
I can picture you as a good teacher. I mean, that's your ability to explain things, even some of the things where I didn't get what you were doing, but you came back to it to make sure that that it was there, the information needed. So I can picture you as a good teacher. That's one of the things that attracted me to your channel, actually.
Oh, thanks.
Very early on.
I think also I was teaching at night. So my first lecture was at 4, and then I lectured my last year of teaching 6, 7, 8, and 9. or 6, 8, and 9. There might have been an hour in between there. But these people had a full day of work, and then they might have to wait till 8 o'clock for a lecture to start. And so I felt like I had to be really exuberant and give them that energy, because they were showing up for me and paying attention. And so I had to show up for them and kind of be there, kind of move around a lot so that they didn't nod off and that kind of thing. And so that was also part of it. The other thing was I had, I guess, gotten pretty deep into my atheism phase.
Yeah.
I discovered a bunch of channels. I knew of Thunderfoot, actually, because I've been quoting his creationism and real science videos actually for a long time. And this was all before the Sarkeesian stuff started.
Oh.
And Armored Skeptic, his anti-creationist videos, and a bunch of other sort of and at this point, it was like 2015 or whatever. And all of that stuff was sort of raging, but I hadn't caught up yet. And I was watching Jake and Hugo, actually, at the time, with the Bible Reloaded.
Yeah, Hannah and Jake now.
Yes, correct. But yes, back then. That's why I said at the time, prior. And I was really enjoying that too. But one thing I noticed, I was also watching the Bible Skeptic channel, which was excellent. But I never really saw them talking about the portrayal of women, except maybe as ancillary characters, or what I saw is really legitimate feminist critiques of religion. A lot of them, they just seem to be, not even paying attention to. And I went looking for that content and I couldn't find it. And it was another one of those, well, I can do that. I'm going to have to.
Those are great. I mean, those are great moments in your life. That's the entirety of my musical career and the entirety of my YouTube career. I can do that.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. It's a motto. Well, I guess it was a subconscious one, maybe for both of us, but. And it was like, okay, well, if I can't find the content I want to watch, I'll just have to make it. And there was a little bit of hesitation. So I studied, being, nerdy. I did a lot of research about cameras and lighting, and your first video is always going to suck. You just have to get over it.
Oh, sure.
And also seeing yourself on camera is really uncomfortable for a while, and then you get over it. And hearing your voice, same thing, you get over it. So that's when I kind of wanted to, I thought naively that feminism was like a one argument. Like feminism was sort of, it has moved on from feminism to other things like LGBT issues. And obviously there was still abortion rights, access and contraception stuff. But I thought like the main stuff about women's basic humanity had been settled. And then I discovered the underbelly of YouTube. And
oh yes, the when everybody put on a fedora.
Yes, and had animals as their avatars in tuxedos.
Oh my god!
Or things in tuxedos, or bears or whatever pictures.
This is I had a channel between 2007 2009. Now it still exists if anybody can find it, because my name wasn't on it, and it's an odd name. And
a little mystery. Go and search up.
Yes, I just watched it recently. It's better than I remembered, but not as good as I wanted. It
sounds like having sex after a long time.
I will find out someday. It's been 18 years, my God.
But I like the hope, better than I remember, but not as much as ours, not as good as I wanted.
Yes, exactly. Well, I'll have a whole different experience next time.
Yeah.
Well, let's not talk about my genitals.
It's your show.
It looks like I'm not going to be until after the operation, which is next summer. So.
Okay.
Just to cross streams. The very end of when I was on is when the anti-feminist stuff started.
Okay.
I had somebody, and while I'm joking about my old channel, one of my friends was harassed into suicide, which is why I stopped.
From online abuse?
From online abuse.
I didn't know that. My heart breaks for you.
Well, I worry more about her. I mean, you know what I mean.
Yeah, but you're living with that. That's
Um,
the.
yeah. So whenever anybody says, it's just words online, no, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to call her, and I didn't realize how bad a shape she was in from all of it. I mean, this is how much friends I had her phone number to call her, but
Mm-hmm.
it's so if anything got me into feminism, I mean, that actually was it, because the gendered way she was harassed
Mm-hmm.
was so out there, and it's like, what? Why?
Mm-hmm.
I,
Why
I
be so vicious?
why be so vicious, and
Yeah.
why? And I started noticing it was women get harassed far more than men. Um, the weird part, uh, trans women actually have some of the male privilege left online, which is also very strange. We get the odd, you're a man, you always will be, but we still have some of the male privilege. We don't get harassed as much as cis women online.
I think from my experience of talking to people who've been harassed, it is definitely the case that trolls will shape their discourse to say the things that they think will be the most hurtful to you.
Yeah.
They're very tailored in their language and their insults, and so they're always going for where they think your weaknesses are. And so I think maybe it's not. I mean, I in terms of cis women and trans women, I don't know if it's a numbers game so much as the kinds of things that are said, and so maybe it's a bit more obvious. Maybe there's other kinds of hostility being shown that's not quite as direct or phrased with such common language, gendered slurs, that are easy to. It's when you scan down a page, you can see, slut pretty easily, whereas a
Yeah.
more complicated insult you might not. So I can't. Yeah. So that's just something that came to mind.
Well, I'm pretty good at giving. I'm pretty good at counter insults, so that does help. I don't actually block anybody, which I probably shouldn't say out loud. I said it
Yeah,
when I
don't.
talked. I said it when I talked to Shives too. I said,
Yeah.
but I will go back and forth with them until they finally block me. So.
That's dedication.
Yes.
That's dedication to troll smashing. Hats off.
Well, one of the I'm going entirely by what I observed, but one of the reasons I think you got the infamous tag is that you do not put up with this shit.
Yeah. I mean, certainly not bearing shit. I wasn't going to put up with lies being spread about me.
Oh,
Definitely
yeah.
not.
Well, bearing is a conversation we're going to have next time. I mean,
yeah.
that will take up the whole hour.
Yeah.
But yeah, what Bearing did was, well, explain a little bit of it. I don't want to take it from you.
So what basically happened was this guy who has this channel, I don't know if people even know who he is anymore, really. Bearing his basically his YouTube channel with his first and last name, which was published on YouTube and had his face and his songs and his voice, the same one that he uses like on his Bearing channel, was linked in an Encyclopedia Dramatica article.
Yeah.
And that happened. And then several days later, and I can't remember I have all the screenshots. I knew all this by heart at one point. But so a couple of days later, information about his girlfriend came out. And at that point, Bearing decided he needed a scapegoat. And he initially turned to Danny K, who has...
Danny Quartz, right?
Yes, Danny Quartz. And then he heard Tim Blake said that I had posted something in a group. Now, there was information in a different group that I saw, but that I hadn't posted it, and that was actually like not even ever brought up. But for some reason, Tim thought he could confide in Bearing Cab, who was like a Bearing lackey. Poor judgment. And Bearing Cab took the conversation and said, "Oh, Kristi is the one who doxed you on Encyclopedia Germanica," even though like what we were talking about, what Tim was talking about, was like 10 days after ED had put his YouTube first name and last name channel, music channel, next to his Bearing channel. And so he decided that I doxed him, and that was what he made videos about. And as a consequence, I was doxed. My family, it wasn't to their address because they'd moved, but I was swatted. There was a swatting attempt, at least. And my docs were released. And then at one point, Barry sent them to me by email. So
Lovely.
yeah, it was a long running thing, and I had plenty of evidence to demonstrate that actually the first person he blamed was someone called Cobalt Cat, who is an editor at Encyclopedia Germanica, who actually authored the article. That was the first person he blamed. And then he decided, no, I gave him, and Danny, we gave him the information. And what he's really mad about was what happened to his girlfriend. But like that was nothing to do with me any more than Cobalt Cat finding his YouTube channel with his music name and putting him up in an article. It had to do with me. So as a consequence, like I was trashed. My name was trashed for a while, and then people who looked into it, like Dusty Smith, looked into it, and he's like, "This is bullshit." And Vadim Newquist looked into it before they would talk to me, and went, "Yeah, this is bullshit." And ever since then, basically, it's sort of just gone away. I don't even really hear about it anymore. It's sort of been forgotten.
Well, as far as I can understand from Dusty, that was one of the two things that moved him away from being a shitlord. So
really, he never told me that. I mean, I'm not saying you're lying. I'm just like, oh, Dusty, why'd you tell me that shit?
No, it's he's mentioned a few things, but two very in particular, and one of them was, the Bearing thing with Kristi is what all he says about it.
Oh,
and I'm like, okay.
Well, thanks, Dusty. I mean, I know when he and I first had contact in Twitter ages ago now, and I just basically gave him all the information I had, and he looked at it and looked into it, and he's like, "Yeah, this seems like bullshit to me." I'm like, "Thank you, mate." Like, that's what I've been saying.
Well, if I'm wrong, I apologize to Dusty. I mean, I am perfectly willing to be wrong. That's one of those things.
Well, I'm a big fan of Dusty's redemption arc. So I mean, I'll even you can just start a rumor. You can start a rumor as far as I'm concerned that I had something to do with that. I'd be happy. But no, he's been such a great. I know financially it's not as profitable, but I'm sure he sleeps better at night. Not trying to be like Armored Skeptic or June in that space.
Yeah, he's shown the difference in his finances, and it is pretty profound. But he's happy, so Dusty.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh God. Humorless Harridan is like everybody. How can you like that humorless Harridan? I said, first of all, she's got a fucking sense of humor. What are you kidding? She's funny as hell.
Yeah, well, but I get all my wit from Kevin. I'm just watching his techniques and copying what he does. That's not entirely true. Although he does raise my Bantz game.
There is that, and you don't use the C word near as much.
No, although he's British. And he's not Scottish, so it's not every other word at least.
Yeah, there's that. So the YouTube channel blew up a lot quicker than normally it would have, and I think that mostly has to do with your talent. I mean, I found you really early. Steve sent me your way.
And he was my first big shout out, and I am so grateful to him. Like, yeah, he's someone who I don't need to talk to Steve to know that he's still a good friend in my life, and I could always turn to him if I needed something.
Yeah, he's Speaking of someone who gets a bad rap online.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, his outpaces mine by ages. I mean, people still talk about blocking like Steve Shives, which was ridiculous to start with. And now, since most people block as much as he did back in the day. Anyway, sorry.
Well, the one, there's, wow, I have like 15 topics and I've only covered 2. Because I wanted to get into Vadim a little bit, who has a bit of a redemption arc himself. I don't think he was one of us, the SJW outrage brigade at first.
No. No, I mean, he, sorry, I keep coughing, but he was, I also knew of his channel because it was a creationist sort of debunking channel.
Right.
And then his content kind of got more political, and it did seem to take on the easier targets. But I think he said this himself, that he realized after listening to some things that he didn't really like where the scene was going, and he didn't like the arguments he heard being made, and he didn't actually believe them. And eventually he had to thread a needle, because Creationist Cat was built on, I understand this, if you make a lot of money from YouTube, you have kinds of considerations that I don't have. Like, if someone really pisses me off, I can just block them, and then like, I'm one of your patrons. And like, okay, well, don't be a dick then. And then they'll leave me, and I'm like, okay, it doesn't matter, I have a full-time job. But when when your rent is about your audience, then that becomes a business decision. And he also eventually made the turn, and I don't know where he is as financially. I don't think he talks about it as much as Dusty does, but I mean, it was a slower evolution, but then again, getting there is what really counts.
I was just on a hangout with him last night, so.
Oh, okay. How was that?
Oh, it was great.
He loves to talk, though. This is it. Like, when I've talked to Vadim, a couple of times, and what's lovely is I can just sort of sit back and relax, because he'll just do all the talking, and I can listen. And occasionally I'll pipe up, but I feel no pressure. He'll do a lot of the conversational weight at the end of the day.
Oh, sure. There was 5 of us, so at one point I just had to say, Vadim, can I go next? Which wasn't an insult. It was just, I had something very specific to what was being said.
Yeah, well, I do that. I try to do that with Kevin too, but he interrupts me anyway.
I tell you what, we have to do this again. I'm in a time crunch, as you know, today. So I only have 10 minutes left at best. Okay. Which sucks, because I would have gone 3-4 hours and had
we could have easily
content for weeks. It would have been great. It would have been better than the Star Wars trilogy.
Lord of the Rings.
or oh my god. Yeah, that's fine.
Can I offer a question then? Because you mentioned it
Absolutely.
Before as one. Kevin and I.
That was the question. How'd you know?
It was the one I wanted to answer. So. Yeah. So I'll try to make sure I'll keep an eye on the time here. 10 minutes. It's not that long. I mean, we've been friends, I guess, probably since about 2015. It was so my channel came out, I think, about in September, and it wasn't too long after that I came across criticisms of Thunderfoot, and then in particular videos by Laughing Witch. Now, this was before she wrote a letter, and I watched her content, and then she talked about Kevin, and that's when I discovered the Manosphere. I have a very distinct memory of being at an Elections, Public Opinion, and Parties conference, and in the morning, as I was getting ready, I was just binging all of his Manosphere videos. And for me, he was just like a YouTuber with a bigger channel than me. But at some point, I don't know maybe this was before Jenny McCarthy just sort of did things that got her excluded. But I think maybe I was talking to Jenny, and Jenny was talking to Laughing Witch. And there was just like the group of people who were trying to deal with the harassment. So but this time, the letter had happened, and then Thunderfoot had fired back by basically going after her personal business. And it was in that group that I met Kevin. So we kind of like started off battle hardened, like we were just like doing battle together, which I guess always provides some basis of comradeship. Then he asked me to be on his channel, or I asked him to be on mine, and we just talked. You just talked and talked and talked and talked. And then through, he has Kevin has such a soft heart, even though it's a hard heart sometimes.
Yeah.
But when he cares about something, it touches him very deeply. And we were working, for over 2 years on trying to resist being harassed while criticizing people who deserved to be criticized because they were putting out bad information. And that group eventually Laughing Witch left. She just went offline. But other people connected with. So we actually started reaching out to people we saw were targets. We tried to do the counteracting of not just letting them go through this, but reaching out and saying, we've been through this too, and this is how we handle it, and it'll pass, and just trying to stop them from driving. And it all feminists, or anyone they were targeting from YouTube. And yeah, that was also like the group where we were like, okay, I came up with Operation Shiny Object, which is, look, we know Bering, anytime you mention his name, has to react. And
Yes.
He's doing all these videos targeting people who don't have a voice. So I can deal with Bering's criticism. I'll mention Bering in a video. You just had to mention him just in a hangout, and he'd flip out. And so he started doing all of this content that basically revolved around Kevin and Michael Rollins and Tim and me. And his channel, I think, became really freaking boring. It was very narrow. It was very limited. And it was bored. It was also bordering on criminal, what he was, in terms of like harassment and what he was organizing and leading, in my opinion. Kevin and I kind of grew up as YouTubers in that condition, and it created a really deep bond.
I wonder, Michael Rowlands just came by and said hi to online, which was sweet.
Yay.
But I don't know if you saw it or not. So, but Tim is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in the answers to anti-SJWs, not almost everybody, half the people in there are gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the other thing, is that Kevin and I are both still doing this. So that also is a self-selection process.
Yeah,
But he's also a politics nerd of U.S. politics, and I am. And then I study British politics, and he's British, and he follows British politics. So we just had all of these nexus of things to talk about. And then the happy hour, it just sort of evolved. It wasn't like, hey, let's do a show and let's try to be a progressive alternative or anything. It was literally like, we should just get together and talk shit and let people listen. They might find it interesting. And that was it, really. And it started off with the Kraut drama, which definitely kept us entertained for a long time. And then ever since then, we kind of needed his therapy. If I'm honest, like Kevin doing a happy hour for me, I cry laughing. I end up, my nose runs, and I have to cough through the second half of the show because he makes me laugh till I cry. And I need that in this Trump era. I need my Kevin.
This is... well, I need you guys in this Trump era.
We are here for you.
There are a bunch of people that keep me going, and whether it's personal messages or our small group that we have on Facebook, don't tell anybody about it.
A secret group. They don't have secret groups on Facebook.
Yeah. It's been you guys. Well, just to be selfish about it, you guys have helped me through this transition more than I could possibly imagine. I thought everybody was going to leave me, because that's what you think when you come out.
Yep, and not even hardly.
I lost 50 friends off of Facebook immediately.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. But the ones that are sticking by you are the friends.
The ones the ones that stuck by me are the people I wanted to stick by me. So.
Exactly, yeah. And the people you want in your life.
And yeah, exactly. And you are one of those people. I'm going to ask you a question, which is going to put you on the spot a bit.
Okay.
Because I do have to go. Can I have you back in January?
Yes. Yeah. I'm back. After I'm here back in Germany for Christmas, but definitely I'm going to take some vacation. I think in January, so I should be very free.
Okay, good, because yeah, I was trying to figure out when you might have a little bit, um, because I still have the white men and SJW thing,
Okay.
because that's such
Oh
a
yes.
huge part of my online life.
Okay.
Um, and where 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 has Tom Avella gone? Long
Yeah.
time.
Tom.
I miss Tom.
Yeah. Probably got a
Um,
love life and more, more cuddle time, less camera time.
oh, but you know, there's Afterglow. You can do videos in
Yeah.
Afterglow. That's fine.
I might have to try that.
Really.
I'll test that theory out.
uh, anyways, I do have to go. I have to do the YouTube prayer first, which is, if you like what you see, consider giving it a like. Please subscribe to the channel. Hit the little bell for notifications. I have PayPal down below for one-time donations, and I have a Patreon. And they finally remembered that I have a name, so it is patreon.com, Kristi Abbey.
Yay.
And I, your voice matters, you matter, your life matters. I thank Kristi Winters for being on. I thank her for lending me her name.
No, no, no. It was your name. You just had to dust off the rest of it under the. It was
Yes.
there.
Well, um, and I thank you for being a friend all this time. It's been incredibly important to me.
Having this conversation has been like a constant hug. Thank you.
Oh, that's sweet. All right, I'm gonna hit the button and say good night. Good night. Say good night to the audience.
Good night, audience.
Okay.